What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. I hope you're all good. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. We're back here in a new setting, and we're going to do a Q&A video. I think it's something that YouTube's known for, isn't it? Q&A videos. I've not done a Q&A video for a long time, so I usually run through these on my podcast. If you don't follow me on my podcast, Bridging the Gap on Spotify, iTunes, podcast app, SoundCloud. I think it's on everywhere. But we're going to run through these questions now. I got literally nearly 300 questions, so appreciate if you ask me a question. I can't go through all of them. I will tend to throw out the ones that are rubbish and I'll keep the ones that are slightly more interesting, but we're going to go a little bit off the cuff. I also think that going off the cuff is also a nice way to do these Q&A videos, because you get those real raw answers off the bat. So let's jump into the Q&A. First question here. We will put them up on the screen for you so you can see. Is there a difference between counting the number of sets per week or calculating the volume per week? And if so, how could either impact training? So I think a lot of people get confused when they think about volume. They think it's sets, so they do more sets, they do more volume. Well, you are doing more volume, but the actual definition of, there are multiple definitions, but most of them are, the consensus is you're doing the amount of weight that you're lifting, the amount of reps that you do, the amount of times that you do it, the amount of sets that you do. That is the amount of volume. You do 100 kilos for one rep for one set. That's 100 kilos of volume. So we know that we want to be progressing that volume over time. So whether that comes in the form of a rep, a set, or any other technique, it's absolutely fine. And you just need to be focusing on progressing that volume every week. So I wouldn't worry about counting sets. I would count the volume. If you were to pick one, just keeping a cap on those sets also is a good idea as well. Best key horizontal and vertical pull within a commercial gyms to focus on. So this is a very difficult question, because obviously you're in a commercial gym. So horizontally, I would probably look at doing some kind of D-handle row, where the D-handles will allow you to rotate in your joints, and I'd probably also use a cable as well, so you can pull directly into where you want to pull rather than someone else. More often than not, these commercial gyms with very commercial equipment, they're just built for your average person. They're not built for people with maybe a longer arm, maybe a shorter arm, maybe longer legs or whatever. So I would always recommend a D-handle and cables and cables for a horizontal row. For a vertical row, like, you could jump on the normal lat pull down. Again, loop the D-handles over so you've got the normal flexion and rotation and that you need at the joint. Load it up over the lat pull down bar, 2 D-handles, shoulder width apart. Put a bench in front of you, get on the bench nice and solid across that chest, and you're just pulling down into those pockets. So instead of doing a wide lat pull down where your elbow really only gets to there, so you're only flexing that much in the lat, whereas if you could bring your elbows forward, you can drive much deeper, bigger contraction in the lat. So it's not optimal to be in that gym. I'd say try get out of that gym, but if you're there, then you got to stay there, and that's what it is. Reverse dieting post-show, is it a myth or is there some strategy? So really all a reverse diet is just slowly bringing calories up. There's nothing special to it. The reason why it's so magical post-show is because you're so susceptible to food. You're in a huge deficit, you're shredded, hopefully. And when you start to add food in, you don't really come out the deficit. Because you're turning that food over so easy. You're using a lot of that food in energy to output. So yes, your input goes up, but so does your output. And actually, because you're in such a big deficit, because you've been in a deficit for however many months, you don't really find maintenance for a while. So it seems magic because you're eating more, almost getting leaner, but feeling better because you're eating more. But it's just basic calories in versus calories out, but just on a little bit more of an efficient scale. So there's nothing crazy to it. I've actually got a video for you that you guys can watch. We'll link it right here. It's a reverse diet that was with Mike Diamonds, and we explain the full process there. What is your TRT dose, and what do you class as a cruise dose? So for me, a cruise should be in a physiological range, and we know that we can work out what the range is by getting a blood test. So if you don't know what a cruise is a period of time where you're using drugs still, anabolics, testosterone, but you're using it in a physiological range to mimic what you would do physiologically. People define a cruise as just using less drugs, so maybe they're above TRT, but for me, my cruise is a true TRT. I use about 120 milligrams of testosterone a week. That hits me mid to upper level of natural testosterone, or I say natural, in a natural limit, in a natural range. As soon as you pass over it, like 150 milligrams had me way out the line when I first started my TRT dose, so I brought it down. So anyone who thinks 200 milligrams is a cruise, or a physiological range, it's not. It's really, really not. So that's where I stand. Is it possible to load 500 milligrams of test E if you can't use 250 a week but can't pin because of work? So you can, because there is a half-life within testosterone, especially in enanthate, which is about 5 to 7 days. So often what people do is if they go away for a week and they can't take injections with them, they'll take double the dose on the day that they leave. You can do it. It's not the best thing to do because imagine you got 500 milligrams in one shot. Like, that is a big old shot, and your testosterone is going to skyrocket to the top, and it's going to slowly come back down, but it's going to, come up to wherever 500 milligrams leaves you, and it's going to come down really slowly because of the enanthate ester. So, within 5 days, you'll be at 250 milligrams. But you've got to consider that when you put in 500 milligrams, your body is going to convert a lot more to estrogen. You're going to aromatize a lot more. So if you're not taking an AI, which you probably wouldn't need to on 250 milligrams a week, you might need one for that week, or you might not need one, but you might have some estrogen related side effects that week. Maybe you're slightly more puffy, maybe your blood pressure goes up a little bit, maybe you have sensitive nipples, because 500 milligrams is double your normal dose. You're going to have, it might not translate into double the aromatization, but you're going to have a significant increase in aromatization and the converting of testosterone to estrogen. If pressing on an angled Smith press, would you press away from your head or towards? Let me work this out. So I'm in a Smith press. Forwards or backwards? I would push it forwards because backwards doesn't seem very convenient for the joint. I don't know what Smith press you're on. I'd have to see it to be exact, but yeah, usually I would be pressing away. It kind of just allows that forward motion in a press. Any press that we do for an upper chest is slightly forward anyway. The only way that I would want a press, I wouldn't want to press back. I wouldn't want to press back. No. What split do you run? I run a unique split that I've not seen many people on. Push and arms. Maybe people do it. Maybe I just don't know. I do push and arms, pull, rest, push and arms, legs. So I hit my chest, delts and arms every 4 days, because I have a rest in between. So it's a lot of push frequency because I'm a men's physique competitor. I wear shorts. My legs aren't too bad anyway, so it's quite a good point where I can put my leg volume on the back burner, but I can put my upper body volume forward because I've got a little bit more capacity. I need that muscle. I need a bigger chest. I need bigger arms and delts, so train them more than anything. Tips to develop the lower lat for a wider look. So that question in itself is a little bit backward because the lower lat is closer to your spine, which would have less effect on the width in my head. But things that are really good for lower back or lower lat, as you said, would be anything where you're driving your elbow into the base of the spine, and it can be vertical and it can be horizontal. Got this right around. It doesn't matter too much because ultimately there is just ways that the lat works, and in every single back exercise you use every single muscle in your back. It just becomes about which one can you get the most range of motion, which can you put the biggest challenge to your lower lat in. For me, it tends to be, like I said, anything I can pull into my base of my spine, like a single arm pull or a unilateral row on the machine plate loaded machine, or like that vertical pull that we mentioned earlier that you could do in commercial gyms. Just loop those D handles over and pull into the base of the spine. 100%. Like, a lot of people get confused with directing. Like, they think they can do a back thickening exercise and a back widthening exercises. There may be exercises that bias those muscles a little bit more, but they're not going to solely focus on those. Like, you can't isolate the upper lat and the lower inner lat. Like I saw a video the other day, someone was like finishing off chest with inner upper chest, and it's just not physically or biologically possible to do that. So just work those lats in the full range that they can be worked in. What's your opinion on CrossFit? I genuinely love CrossFit. I think it's fucking amazing. Like, I've been watching the CrossFit Games with my girlfriend recently. We watched the 15, 16, 17 on Netflix. And then obviously it's the CrossFit Games at the moment. And just watching Matt Fraser become Lionel Messi of CrossFit is just crazy to see how much further him and Tia Tooney are above anyone else. Is just a feat of biological engineering, and it's amazing to watch. I think what's really, really good about CrossFit is they hit so many different types of skill. They sprint, they lift, they pull up They run, they row, they handstand, gymnastics. There's so many different aspects of it that I can see why they call themselves the fittest on earth, because they are fucking strong in Olympic lifts like bodybuilders, but also they have the speed, the power, the flexibility, the agility as well. So I really, really do think it's very, very impressive. And I know why they get a bad rap, because they push themselves to the absolute limit, and then they say, okay, now you got to do a 1 rep max front squat. Like, I can see why that's a little bit dodgy, because you've sprinted, pulled up, and done your gymnastics all in that same day. Your body is on the limit of being able to keep your form tight, and then your injuries can start to creep in. But I don't think I've ever seen Matt Fraser ever have an injury, so that could be bullshit as well. Opinions on lower volume plans like Dorian. So I'd like to think you follow me because you asked me a question. That's how I train. So I do lower volume, I do higher frequency, I train like Dorian as such, in terms of we have a all-out set. I just am I'm not going to say I'm more tactical than Dorian, because he was a very, very tactical dude, but I really, really think about my sessions from start to finish when working over that low volume, high intensity type of style. So I love that style. It suits my personality. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches R&R coaches, people who solely prescribe Repton Reserve type training, is that potentially they overlook the bodybuilding mindset of wanting to push themselves so far. And that plays quite hand in hand with high intensity training, because you've got that mindset of wanting to push yourself. You know that if you turn to failure, you just feel like, okay, I've done my job here. So I think that the personality aspect of bodybuilding goes hand in hand with that Dorian type style. Do you log all your lifts or just compounds? I log everything. I don't know why you wouldn't log everything. I don't think you need to log everything. But if you're trying to be the best, and you're trying to make a lot of progress in your bodybuilding, and maybe you're just someone who likes to record things and have a visual representation of your progress, why would you not progress your bicep curl? If you go in and do the bicep curl and you don't know what you did last week, or maybe you know vaguely in your head, but where are you going with that? Like, you're just going to train like arbitrary numbers, or it doesn't make sense for you to only count compounds. Compounds like are a really, really good way to have a backbone and a spine of your exercises and your workouts. I think we've all got those compounds that we want to progress. I want to get that Cybex hack squat up. I want to get that Cybex incline up for sure. Then if you're someone who likes a little bit more variety, I can see why you'd want to rotate your isolations and maybe track them less, but I would still know what those rotations are. So you do a bicep curl 1 week, maybe you do an incline bicep curl, maybe you do a preacher bicep curl the next week, and you keep rotating, but just know where you were, just know what you did last time that you did it, and just try and progress that, because ultimately the muscle is going to respond to the amount of tension you can put through it, and if it was more than last time, you're going to elicit more hypertrophy. So if you don't know what you did last time, and you don't know whether you did more than last time, and you can't distinguish whether it feels like you did more than last time, it just makes sense to count things. But I appreciate you can get very anal about it as well. When doing a crucifix or cuff lateral raise, is it best to flex the elbows or keep them straight? I think a lot of this depends on how much pressure you're going to deal with in your joint. For me, I've just started to put my cuffs on my wrist, the cuffs that I've made, which I mentioned about 17 times in the last video. But I've never done that before, because I've always had either golfer's elbow or tennis elbow, which has put a lot of pressure when I'm in that lengthened position, and the cuffs on my wrist, and it just pulls on the inside of my elbow or the outside of my elbow when it was flaring up. But now I've started to deal with those problems. I've been able to move back down to my wrist, because it adds a lot more load when you're in that lengthened range and your hands are fully closed. You can already see that I'm getting, if I've got my cuffs on, I'm getting pressure from here, whereas if the cuffs are here, there's less pressure in this first part of that lengthened range where the delt is fully elongated. So depending where you are it's going to get complicated now. Depending on where you are in your session, if you're trying to work your delt through the full contractile range from fully lengthened to fully shortened, I should have done it this way, fully lengthened to fully shortened, then probably on your wrists. But if you're just worried about hitting that mid to short range, you can definitely go elbows, and you can definitely flex at the elbow as well, because you're just trying to work that mid to upper range. But just make sure that if you do only train the mid to upper range, that you either superset it or you're doing something to work that lengthened range afterwards, or you've done it before. So a really good one that I like to do sometimes is I do a lying or a crucifix lateral raise, and I'll put the cuff on my elbow because you can put a lot more weight on because of the lever distance. You'd lift like normal till failure in that mid to short range. You'd then fail, stop, and then you'd put the cuffs back down to your wrists, and then you can superset with just trying to get the length and range. And really, you don't need to go up to the mid, so you can just fluctuate in that period of time. So you got to just be conscious of what you're trying to target and where you're trying to go with the exercise. What annoys you about bodybuilding as a sport? Not much annoys me in bodybuilding. It's more the industry of bodybuilding that probably annoys me a little bit, and it's just the lack of what annoys me the most. People with really good genetics annoys me the most. Let's just come into my head, because I look at some people, form shit, eat shit, train shit, haven't got the commitment I have, blow me away. I'm not going to name names, but you guys know exactly who I'm talking about. And that type of thing annoys me as a sport. That annoys me because no matter what I do in terms of how hard I work, not that it's going to be any excuse, because I'm going to always do whatever I can, but just knowing that I could put more work in than someone and they can still beat me based off genetics, that's quite a hard thing. Whereas if you were doing something maybe more skill based, for example CrossFit, I probably think the hardest workers probably win, and of course they're going to have the genetic capability, but there's a lot more just grit and determination involved in those like endurance things. To be fair, genetics probably plays a huge part in that as well, but that's probably the thing that annoys me the most in bodybuilding, which is completely out of my hands. So I should just let it go and not be annoyed about it. But fuck it, I will be. When you track your calories, do you record raw weight or cooked weight? I always just do it raw, and I don't worry about which one. I get some people that say, "Do you measure your chicken from Tesco or from Sainsbury's?" I just find raw chicken and the one that's verified, and I just weigh it and put it in. I have the same amount every single meal, and it's not going to make a difference if it's from Tesco or Sainsbury's. And if it is a difference, it's not going to make a difference if it's 10 to 50 calories. If it's consistent every single day, it's not going to make a difference whatsoever. How do you calculate your macros? So many different formulas to choose from. I think macros are quite an easy one, because you can just use calculations to work them out based off where your calories are. For example, for protein, simple one, 2 to 3 grams per kilogram of body weight. For me, I'm 110 kilograms. I'm heavily muscled. I'm on anabolics. I'm going to push towards that 3 grams per kilogram of body weight, because I've got a higher need for protein. So I have 300 grams of protein, which is about 2.8 or something per kilogram. If you're less muscled, if you're natural, if you're someone who doesn't like to eat much protein, if you're someone who's conscious about the protein that you're eating, eat closer towards that too. You could probably go a little bit less than that. You probably could. I think protein is heavily overeaten in the industry because it's a miracle macronutrient that's going to grow the muscle. Your body is going to grow whether you put stress through it and you've got adequate protein. Adequate protein is a lot lower than people think it is. So that's an easy one for protein. To make it easier, probably like 1.6 to 1.8 to 3 kilograms. Just be within that range, and I wouldn't worry about it ever again, unless you've gained 10 kilos of muscle. Then you can put it up. Fat is a good one. I usually go for about 0.4 to 0.6 or 7 grams per kilogram of body weight. So I'm 110 kilos, so I want to average around about 50 to 60 grams a day. I actually have 50 grams on my training days, and I have 115 grams on my non-training days, which are twice a week. So on average, if you add 50, 50, 50 5 times, plus 115 plus 2 times, because that's the week, divided by 7, I'm up towards 70 or 80 grams of fat on average for my body weight per day. That doesn't mean that it's gonna stay there. Prep sometimes means you got to compromise your health. It's not healthy. There's no two ways about it. So there will be times when I end up on 30 grams of fat per day, and it will not be nice, but that's generally where I go with fat and protein. Carbs, the rest of it. So if you've got 3,000 calories to eat, that's your maintenance. You know that 0.4 to 0.8 grams is going to be from fat or per kilogram, and then you know that 1.6, 1.8 to 3 grams per kilogram of protein is going to be from that. From there, you're going to have a remaining amount of calories. Divide that by 4, and that is going to be your amount of carbs that you eat. Super, super easy. If you don't know what calories to eat either, just start tracking what you're eating. Weigh yourself for a week. If you gain weight, you're in a surplus. If you lose weight, you're in a deficit. Easy. Then just adjust accordingly. Final question, guys. I'm sorry to anyone who else has asked the question. I've got 7 more pages of questions here that I've needed to go through. We're creeping up on a long video now. So the question here is range of motion versus muscle tension. I know they're both crucial, but does one outweigh the other? I've seen a few examples of, let's say, a bicep curl where tension is held and range of motion is glorified. Is one more important than the other? Does that make sense? So I'm a big believer that both of those are going to go hand in hand. There is never going to be a position where you choose one over the other. If you have great range of motion and zero muscular tension, nothing is going to happen to that muscle. If you have great muscular tension but zero range of motion, nothing is going to happen to that muscle. What you really need is a combination of the both, where you want to go through the biggest range. I keep doing a bicep curl. You go through the biggest range of motion that you have available to you within your active range of motion, which is just the range of motion you have without bearing weight. So for example, in a bench press, all we do to find active range of motion is you'll pull your hands back until they stop. So right there is my active range of motion. Any further that I can only get with a load on the bar is gonna offload a little bit onto passive tissues. Granted, not entirely, but you're gonna have some detrimental effects into the joint, a little bit more joint pressure, and just some added load to those tissues. So you want to work through that full contractile range that you have available to you with as much muscular tension as you can. If in an ideal world I could lift 3 kilos on every single muscle part and grow, I would, because you want to be able to get the most that you can out of the least. And this means generating the most amount of muscular tension that you can in a muscle, while just being conscious of the range of motion, especially when you're trying to load the tension as much as you can, getting into those weaker positions of range of motion. For example, when your arm is perfectly straight in a bicep, it's going to put a little bit more pressure on those tendons. So you've got to be conscious of that. So in answer to your question, there is never, ever, ever a scenario where one comes up without the other, and you have to concentrate on both. There is never, and bodybuilding is never going to be a one story. It's always going to be multifaceted. So that's something to consider. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this one, drop a comment, drop a like. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and we'll do some more of these, maybe periodically, once every 2 weeks, once every month or so, just so we can get you guys some long form content on here as well. I hope that guys made sense. Hope that made sense, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, guys. We'll see you soon. Peace.